The final hours of Pompeii stand as one of humanity's most chilling memories. A flourishing Roman settlement nestled beneath a towering peak was devastated in mere moments, entombed in volcanic debris, and frozen so perfectly that almost 2 millennia later, we can still traverse its ancient pathways. The vision is so striking, so consuming, that it has eclipsed all other chapters of the city's story. Yet this is profoundly unfair. No settlement deserves to be remembered solely through its darkest chapter. Tonight, we embark on a journey through Pompeii's complete timeline, from its earliest inhabitants through waves of conquest and cultural shifts, through cycles of conflict and abundance, through the forces that molded it into the metropolis it would ultimately become. We will witness the eruption not as the city's finale, but as a pivotal moment in its extended existence. We will discover how that existence endured in surprising ways as the settlement continued to draw wanderers back, refusing to fade into nothingness. We will examine how it transformed into myth only to be unearthed generations later, reigniting both avarice and scholarly interest, sparking an ongoing battle to comprehend and protect what survives. But before we venture further, I must express gratitude to all who have been following along, offering insights and awaiting each new narrative. Assembling this account has been quite an undertaking, and I trust you will find it rewarding. Welcome to the Veiled Past, where we lift the curtain on history's forgotten stories. If you love diving deep into the mysteries of ancient civilizations, hit that subscribe button and join our community of history seekers. Tonight, we journey to a city that refused to die, buried for centuries, yet speaking louder than ever. What secrets lie beneath the ashes of Pompeii, and why does this ancient tragedy still grip our imagination 2,000 years later? If this story captivates you, show your support with a like and share it with fellow history enthusiasts. Before there was a metropolis, there was a peak. It dominated a coastal plain in southern Italia's sunlit region. For countless ages it had expelled fire, covering the territory of Campania in successive layers of ash, rendering the earth dark and extraordinarily fertile. Yet now it rested dormant. Its flames had ceased. Its inclines had become verdant with woodland. And flowing through all that richness, the Sarno River carved its steady path toward the sea. Into this terrain, during the 8th century before our common era, arrived the Oscans, an Italic people of cultivators and shepherds who had journeyed down from the neighboring uplands. They established themselves upon a modest plateau, an outcrop of ancient cooled lava that formed a natural elevation above the plain, commanding views of the river as it wound seaward. The mountain provided everything they required. Its forests supplied lumber for their dwellings, and the solidified ground beneath bore the burden of their walls and hearths. But it was the earth itself that made this territory invaluable. The volcanic soil yielded harvests unlike anywhere else in the region. The olive groves they cultivated grew robust and laden with fruit, producing oil abundantly. The grapevines thrived, generating a rich, powerful wine. They constructed their dwellings in 5 modest settlements, simple structures of timber and stone clustered together on the plain. In the Oscan tongue, the word for 5 was pomp, and thus the location became known as Pompeii, a designation that fundamentally meant the 5 settlements. For generations, the Oscans' world was bounded by mountain and bay, their lives centered on what the soil could yield. But the sea was a highway, and it was about to deliver a new world to their doorstep, one that would forever transform their simple farming community. Around 740 BC, a transformative and enduring shift came to Campania. Across the bay, a new force established itself with the creation of Cumae, the first Hellenic settlement on the Italian mainland. These newcomers represented a different breed entirely. They were not highland farmers but seafarers and traders, explorers from a more ancient and refined culture. They perceived the world not as scattered plots of land, but as an interconnected network of harbors. For them, the Sarno River's mouth represented an ideal entrance point, a sheltered, navigable harbor providing direct access to Campania's fertile interior. The Greeks arrived seeking the raw abundance of the territory, timber from the mountain forests for their vessels, and surplus grain from the fields. In exchange, they brought products of a more sophisticated world. For the first time, Pompeii's inhabitants encountered elegant pottery decorated with complex scenes of deities and legendary heroes, a portal into a realm of mythology they had never known. They handled refined bronze containers and tasted the smoother, more delicate qualities of Greek wine and olive oil. Yet the exchange brought more than mere goods. It transmitted ideas, an alternative way of perceiving reality. Oscan artisans who for generations had created simple, utilitarian vessels now studied the graceful forms and decorative patterns of the Greeks, merging foreign aesthetics with their own heritage. Leaders who had ruled through strength and tradition began to observe another form of power, one grounded in prosperity and trade. This marked the beginning of a cultural synthesis, a gradual and irreversible blending of two civilizations. The most striking symbol of this new influence emerged in the 6th century BC. On a prominent headland overlooking the bay, a magnificent temple was erected. It was not a simple outdoor shrine to local spirits, but a grand Doric temple built in the authentic Greek manner. The temple served as a declaration. This modest Oscan settlement now regarded itself as part of a broader Mediterranean world, a vital junction between the land-based Italic interior and the dynamic maritime civilization of the Greeks. As Greek presence solidified along the coastline, a new power pressed down from the north, a formidable and mysterious civilization known as the Etruscans. They were master builders, accomplished artists, and disciplined warriors, positioned to control much of the Italian peninsula. Attracted by Campania's legendary fertility, they expanded southward, establishing a major stronghold at Capua. From there, their influence radiated, and the small port of Pompeii was inevitably drawn into their sphere. This was not a violent seizure but a political and economic integration. The Etruscans were administrators, and under their governance the agricultural capacity of the region was maximized. Commerce along the Sarno River became more consistent and lucrative. The town's wealth expanded, and with it, its significance. To safeguard the prospering town and its increasing riches, Pompeii began building its first genuine city fortifications, a substantial barrier constructed from blocks of tufa, a soft, malleable volcanic stone. These walls were designed with remarkable foresight. The enclosure encompassed not only the town's core of residences and workshops, but also a wide expanse of surrounding agricultural land, ensuring that during a siege, Pompeii's residents would have a reliable food supply within their defenses. But Etruscan ambition extended beyond the fertile plains. They sought mastery of the entire bay, a goal that would bring them into direct confrontation with the Greeks. The coming clash would reshape the region forever and leave Pompeii caught in the aftermath. Capua's supremacy brought standardization to the region. Its craftsmen, its architecture, and its commercial networks shaped the subordinate towns surrounding it. Yet Etruscan ambition was not satisfied with the wealthy inland plains. They sought dominion over the entire bay, an objective that brought them into direct collision with the Greeks. Their advance was initially halted in 524 BC when a significant land offensive against the Greek city of Cumae was defeated. For 50 years, an uneasy equilibrium persisted. Then in 474 BC, the Etruscans attacked again, launching their naval forces against Cumae and meeting catastrophe. The massive sea battle concluded in total defeat. With their maritime power shattered, their grip on Campania disintegrated. The Etruscan presence vanished from Pompeii, leaving behind only remnants of their organization in the city's walls and residences. With their withdrawal, the prolonged contest for the region ended, and a profound quietness descended upon Pompeii. The stable commercial system that had linked it to the wider world was fractured. Trading vessels that had regularly filled the river's mouth became an uncommon sight. Inland routes fell silent as merchants, wary of the unstable countryside, selected safer passages. Pompeii was becoming a place of stagnation, a provincial town eclipsed by its more powerful neighbors. This decline, however, would not endure. From the highlands of Italia's interior, a new and dynamic power was ascending. The Samnites, a fiercely autonomous martial people who shared common Oscan ancestry with Pompeii's earliest founders. When Pompeii fell under their authority, it was not simply conquered, it was reborn. Under Samnite governance, the ancient Italic language was reinstated to prominence in administration, worship, and civic life. After centuries of Greek and Etruscan influence, the city's original voice returned. Stability and organization followed. Commerce revived, and Pompeii began to flourish once more. A people forged in the harsh realities of mountain warfare understood that prosperity attracted peril. The old tufa walls were no longer considered adequate to defend their thriving city. The Samnites embarked on a project of immense magnitude. They erected two parallel walls from blocks of hard Sarno limestone, filling the gap between with a massive core of earth and rubble. The outcome was not merely a barrier but a rampart, an imposing ring of stone that encircled their world and secured the peace in which Pompeii could genuinely prosper. Behind the safety of the new defenses, Pompeii's wealth and confidence flourished. The Samnite elite, enriched by Campania's agricultural abundance, began constructing houses on an unprecedented scale. Public life also became more refined. The Forum, once a simple open marketplace, was transformed into an organized monumental center of civic activity. While the city's principal temples were maintained and lavishly embellished, Pompeii now stood as a powerful and prosperous Samnite city, a thriving regional center. Its identity was a rich and complex weave. Its core was fiercely Oscan, its culture shaped by the legacies of the Greeks and Etruscans, and its form was encased in the stone armor of its new rulers. It was a city at the zenith of its power, assured and secure, convinced that its fate rested in its own hands. But as the 4th century BC drew to a close, a new force began to assert itself on the Italian peninsula, one that would prove far more relentless than any power that had come before. This was Rome, and its expansion would change everything. The new power emerging on the Italian peninsula was not a loose confederation of tribes, nor a chain of independent coastal cities, but a single ambitious city-state, a people of warriors, builders, and legislators from the river plains of central Italia. This was Rome. Its expansion would be unlike anything that had preceded it, unrelenting and all-encompassing, as one by one it subdued and absorbed its adversaries. For the Samnites who now ruled Pompeii and the surrounding territory, Rome's expansion represented a direct menace. What ensued was a prolonged and savage struggle, a series of 3 great conflicts that would be remembered in history as the Samnite Wars. For more than half a century, the hills and valleys of central and southern Italia became a battleground. As a strong and loyal Samnite city, Pompeii was inescapably drawn into this fight for survival. Men departed from its gates to join the Samnite forces. Farms were commandeered for the war effort, and the populace anxiously awaited reports from the front. Year by year, the reports grew grimmer. The Roman legions, disciplined and unstoppable, proved an irresistible force. As the conflict progressed, the fighting drew nearer and nearer to Campania, and Rome's shadow fell directly upon Pompeii. Around 310 BC, a Roman naval force landed on the coast near Pompeii and dispatched raiding parties into the surrounding lands, a brutal demonstration of how far their power now extended. Though local forces managed to rally and drive the invaders back to their vessels, the message was unmistakable. The war was no longer distant. The Roman raid was merely a prelude. Over the following decades, Rome's armies pressed their advantage with unwavering determination. One by one, the Samnite strongholds fell. Their alliances crumbled. Their armies were broken, and by 290 BC, the long struggle that had begun in the mountain heartlands had reached its bitter conclusion. For Pompeii, the choice that followed was stark: stand with their Samnite kin and face annihilation, or submit and preserve their people at the cost of independence. Submission was a bitter blow to their pride and heritage, but it was the only path to survival. Reluctantly, they chose to yield. Pompeii was not destroyed or plundered. Instead, it was bound to Rome by treaty, becoming a socius, an ally in name but not in power. The arrangement was a gilded cage. Pompeii lost the right to conduct its own foreign affairs. Its long-standing ties with other cities and peoples were now dictated by the Roman Senate. Most crucially, it was obligated to provide soldiers for Rome's endless wars. It retained a measure of autonomy. Rome allowed the city to govern itself, permitting life within the walls to continue much as it always had. For the next 2 centuries, Pompeii existed in a state of uneasy peace. Protected by Rome's power, the city prospered. Trade revived, wealth flowed in, and its elite adorned the city with new monuments that reflected both ambition and pride: the first public baths, elegant temples, and a grand theater that became the centerpiece of civic life. Yet beneath this surface of success, resentment began to grow. Generation after generation, Pompeian men were sent to fight and die for Rome, helping to build its empire but denied its rewards. They were allies without equality, their loyalty and their blood taken for granted. The peace held, but it rested on an imbalance that would not last forever. In 91 BC, the Roman Senate once again refused to grant the allies the citizenship they had earned with their blood. The dam of resentment finally broke, and across the peninsula, they rose in a violent, desperate rebellion that would bring Rome's legions to Pompeii's very gates. The uprising was called the Social War, and it was a conflict that would tear the region apart. Alongside its neighbors in Campania, Pompeii joined the rebellion, declaring its freedom from Roman rule. Within the city, the language of the conquerors was set aside. Oscan, the tongue of their ancestors, was restored as the language of law and public life, a clear and deliberate claim to sovereignty. The Roman response was swift and merciless. This was not a foreign war. It was a rebellion at the very heart of their power, and it had to be crushed without pity. The Republic dispatched one of its most ruthless generals, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, to pacify the rebels in Campania. In the year 89 BC, his legions arrived at the gates of Pompeii. In defiance, the men of the city took up their positions on the great limestone ramparts, ready to defend their home against the very power that had once guaranteed its peace. The assault fell on Pompeii's northern wall, the strongest section of the city's defenses, but also the most vulnerable. While the other sides rose steeply along the ridge, the north faced an open plain, the only ground where Sulla could mass his infantry. The sea. The defenders knew it was their weak point. That's why they had fortified it so heavily. Sulla knew it too and directed his full force there. For weeks, Roman siege engines hurled their stones against the walls. The defenders held firm, and the fortification stood strong, bearing the assault with little real damage. But Pompeii's fate no longer rested on its defenses. It was bound to the wider rebellion, and that struggle was collapsing across Campania. Its allied cities were falling to the disciplined power of the Roman legions. In the end, the city stood alone, its walls unbreached, but its purpose gone. There would be no relief, no allies left to fight beside them. The defenders laid down their arms and the gates were opened. Pompeii did not fight to its destruction. Once again, it chose survival. Sulla's legions marched through the gates, and the city that had resisted for so long fell quiet. Its future lay in the hands of the man who had brought it to its knees. The legionaries patrolled the streets, but the city's final sentence was not delivered. Its conqueror was drawn away by larger conflicts, a vicious civil war in the streets of Rome, and a long campaign in the east. For 9 years, Pompeii lingered in a state of uncertainty. The great building projects of the past ceased, and the commerce that had once filled its port dwindled. It was a city holding its breath, its fate suspended on the fortunes of a distant general. Lucius Cornelius Sulla returned to Italia, not merely as a conqueror but as its dictator, the undisputed master of the Roman world. In 80 BC, his attention turned to the rebel city that had once defied him. The judgment, when it came, was not destruction but erasure. He decreed that Pompeii be refounded as a Roman colony, granting it a new and imposing title, Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeianorum. This was more than just a name. It was a declaration of ownership. Cornelia honored Sulla's own powerful family clan, a reminder of whose power now ruled the city. Veneria was a dedication to the goddess Venus, Sulla's divine patron and the proclaimed source of his victories. Pompeii now belonged to the Cornelia and to Venus. Its old gods and old masters were silenced. This silencing was far from symbolic. It was methodical and comprehensive. The great Samnite families who had led the rebellion were about to lose everything, and a new Roman order would be planted directly on top of the defeated population. Latin, the language of the conquerors, became the medium of law, of commerce, and of public ambition. Oscan, which had been reasserted with such pride during the rebellion, did not vanish, but it was driven from the forum. It retreated into the quiet corners of the home, becoming the language of family and private memory. The next and most devastating blow was the confiscation of property. The great Samnite families who had led the rebellion, whose ancestral homes and fertile vineyards had sustained their power for generations, were stripped of everything. This property was then used to settle the final debt of Rome's victorious general, the retirement of his soldiers. Around 2,000 of Sulla's most loyal and battle-hardened veterans were settled in Pompeii as the new colonists. These were men who had followed Sulla across Italia and into the east, men who had earned their reward through years of brutal warfare. They were given the best houses within the walls and the richest farmlands outside them. They became, in an instant, the new ruling class, a Roman elite planted directly on top of the defeated population. For the conquest to be permanent, the still Samnite public face of the city had to change. The new rulers undertook the monumental task of reshaping Pompeii in stone, ensuring that its very architecture would speak the language of Rome. In the decades following, Pompeii became a vast construction site. Each new building was designed to project Roman power, Roman values, and Roman authority. The transformation began in the Forum. For centuries, this had been the center of Samnite public life, a somewhat chaotic open space for markets and gatherings. Now, it was to be remade as a showcase of Roman order. On its western flank rose a new basilica, the seat of law and commerce. Beside it, the main temple was rebuilt as a Capitolium dedicated to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, the official gods of the Roman state. Together, these buildings proclaimed a new hierarchy of faith and authority, binding Pompeii's citizens to Rome through both law and religion. Alongside these monuments of authority, the Forum's new design also included a revolutionary public space for its citizens. The Forum baths were built, establishing a sophisticated new center for communal well-being and social interaction. This was not just a place for hygiene, but a reflection of the Roman way of life itself, where physical care, leisure, and conversation merged into a single rhythm of daily routine. The new order had asserted its power in Pompeii's civic heart, but to truly forge a lasting community, its leaders knew that law and commerce were not enough. They needed to provide spectacle, a shared experience that could bind the entire populace together. In pursuit of this vision, a great amphitheater was built on the city's edge, one of the first of its kind in the Roman world. This vast elliptical arena was designed for the brutal spectacle of gladiatorial combat. The new Pompeii, with its grand public buildings and Roman-style forum, projected an image of order and permanence. But this physical stability proved a fragile illusion as the wider Roman world descended into chaos. Ambitious generals fought one another for power, and for decades the Italian peninsula was scarred by war. For Pompeii, this meant uncertainty and fear as armies marched and loyalties shifted. The turmoil ended in 31 BC when Julius Caesar's heir, Octavian, emerged victorious at the Battle of Actium, taking the name Augustus soon after and bringing peace to the Roman world. For a city like Pompeii, the arrival of this new imperial peace, the Pax Romana, felt like the dawn after a long and violent night. The fear of marching armies vanished. The sea lanes grew secure once more, and the trade that formed the city's lifeblood began to flow freely. Confidence returned, and with it, a new wave of prosperity. Pompeii's reputation grew, not just as a center for trade but as a fashionable resort town for the Roman elite. Wealthy senators and merchants began to build luxurious seaside villas along the coast, drawn by the region's beauty and its sophisticated Greek heritage. Their presence brought new money, new ideas, and a new level of ambition to the city. This new ambition found its ultimate expression in an engineering feat remarkable even by the grand standards of Rome, a vast aqueduct that would transform daily life in Pompeii forever. But prosperity would bring its own challenges, and the city's economy would soon rest on a foundation both brilliant and brutal. Around the year 20 BC, work began on a great aqueduct named the Aqua Augusta in honor of the emperor himself. Its concept was revolutionary for its time. This was not an aqueduct for a single city but a vast regional network. Stretching for nearly 100 miles, it was the longest aqueduct in the Roman world. Pompeii was just one stop on this great line, but the connection changed everything. For the first time, a constant and reliable supply of clean mountain water was channeled directly into the city's heart. It now gushed from public fountains in the streets, improving the health and well-being of every citizen. For the very wealthy, the ultimate luxury became possible, a private connection that brought running water directly into their city homes and to the grand villas that dotted the surrounding countryside. At the same time, a great project of modernization transformed the city's streets. Workers systematically paved the old dirt and gravel roads with heavy, hard-wearing blocks of volcanic basalt. They raised high sidewalks to protect pedestrians from the traffic of carts and mules, and placed large stepping stones at intersections, allowing people to cross the street above the flow of rainwater and refuse in the gutters below. The widespread stability of the Augustan peace transformed the vast Roman world into a unified and reliable market. A surge in production followed, elevating Pompeii from a regional center to a thriving hub of trade and craftsmanship. The aim was no longer merely to live well, it was to supply an empire. This new ambition reshaped the very landscape. The old patchwork of small family farms was steadily absorbed into larger estates, consolidated under owners who treated agriculture as enterprise. Hillsides were terraced with high-yield vines and olive trees, the region's most profitable crops. At harvest, production unfolded on a grand scale. The wine and oil were processed, sealed in the familiar two-handled amphorae, and stamped with the estate's mark, a guarantee of quality that carried the fame of the slopes of Vesuvius across the Mediterranean world. While ships loaded with the region's wine and oil departed regularly, others arrived with the materials of Roman luxury. Blocks of marble from distant quarries for the city's villas and temples, crates of raw metals and glass, fragrant spices and resins from the east, and even wild animals destined for the amphitheater games, all circulating through the city's busy docks. But Pompeii was more than farmland and harbor. It was a city of artisans. Its textile makers were renowned for transforming local wool into fine cloth traded far beyond the city's borders. Perfume workshops thrived, blending exotic spices with native flowers into scented oils. Metal workers crafted bronze lamps and statues in busy workshops, while potteries produced vessels for every purpose, from cookware to the thousands of amphorae that carried wine and oil across the empire. It was another pungent trade, however, that created some of the city's most spectacular fortunes. The city became the capital of an immensely profitable industry, transforming the refuse of the fishing catch into garum, the empire's most sought-after condiment. In large workshops lining the port, a foul-smelling alchemy took place. Fish and salt were left to ferment under the sun, slowly breaking down into a potent, savory sauce. But a single brutal foundation supported this entire engine of prosperity: the unending work of thousands of enslaved men, women, and children. Their forced labor was an essential component of every industry, from the fields to the city docks. The golden age of Pompeii, like the golden age of Rome itself, rested on a system of profound and unquestioned human exploitation. And yet within this brutal system, Roman society allowed for a single complex possibility that shaped its very fabric: manumission, the act of a master freeing a slave. It was a difficult path available to only a few. A slave might be freed after their master's death as a reward for long and loyal service. Some, especially those with valuable skills, were allowed to earn their own money and could, over many years, save enough to purchase their own liberty. Freedom, when it came, was not absolute. A freedman remained bound by obligations to their former master, and the social stigma of their past would follow them for the rest of their lives. But this slim hope was a constant driving force within the enslaved population, fueling a deep and persistent ambition for a life beyond bondage. This ambition was a powerful force in Pompeii's economy, as freedmen became managers, traders, and brokers. But the city's confidence was about to face a shocking test when a rivalry with a neighboring town would spiral into violence and bring imperial judgment down upon Pompeii. The energy that had made Pompeii a household name across the empire did not fade with the death of Augustus. In the decades that followed, the city grew rich, confident, and perhaps a little arrogant. Its people no longer saw themselves as subjects of a conquered colony, but as citizens of a commercial powerhouse. Like any city eager to assert itself, Pompeii needed a rival, and it found one in nearby Nuceria. In the year 59 AD, this simmering animosity reached its breaking point. A wealthy sponsor staged a magnificent set of gladiatorial games in Pompeii's amphitheater. The event drew enormous crowds, filling the stone seats to capacity. But the crowd was dangerously divided. Thousands of Pompeians came to cheer on their city, and thousands of Nucerians made the short journey to do the same for theirs. The trouble began not on the sand of the arena but in the stands. It started, as it often does, with words. Taunts and insults flew across the seating sections, the passionate shouts of rival fans echoing in the great stone bowl. Soon the verbal sparring escalated: a thrown piece of fruit, a hurled stone, and the fragile piece shattered. Pockets of brawling erupted throughout the crowd. The spectacle in the arena was forgotten, replaced by a real and chaotic battle in the stands. The brawl quickly spilled out of the arena's gates and into the surrounding streets, becoming a full-scale riot. The Nucerians, caught in hostile territory, were overwhelmed. By the time the fighting subsided, the ground was littered with the wounded and the dead. For the people of Nuceria, this was more than a riot, it was a massacre. Grieving and outraged, they sought justice from the only power that could overrule a city like Pompeii. A delegation journeyed to Rome to appeal directly to Emperor Nero, reporting the killings and demanding punishment. The verdict, when it came, was decisive. Pompeii was banned from holding any gladiatorial games for a period of 10 years. The amphitheater stood silent, its great arches empty, while life continued around it. But the games had been more than entertainment. They were the city's defining ritual, the occasions when all of Pompeii gathered as one. Without them, something essential was missing. The city went on, quieter now, waiting for the emperor's ban to lift. On the 5th of February, 62 AD, a roar returned to Pompeii, but not from the amphitheater. It came from below. The people were accustomed to the earth's small movements. Minor tremors were a familiar part of life in the shadow of the mountain. This one began like the others, but it did not pass. The tremor grew stronger. The The ground began to move in ways the people had never felt before, not the familiar brief shudder, but a sustained, building force that seemed to have no end. People rushed from their homes into the streets, but there was nowhere safe. Falling debris rained down from the buildings above, while the ground itself remained unsteady beneath their feet. Then the city began to break. In its heart, entire sections of the Forum collapsed. The basilica's columns cracked and tumbled. The Capitolium and other temples lay in ruins. Across the city, private homes and workshops suffered equally. Some were reduced to rubble, others were left standing but dangerously unstable. The Aqua Augusta was damaged along its route. The fountains went dry and the city's lifeblood stopped flowing. The terror of the earthquake was soon overshadowed by the monumental task of rebuilding. For most of the population, this was a matter of immediate survival. For the traditional elite, however, it was a burden they were free to decline. These were the old landowning families whose names had governed the city and defined its public values for generations. But their fortunes were not tied to this one ruined town. Possessing other villas across Italia, they saw Pompeii as just one of many assets, and a badly damaged one at that. Faced with a long, costly work of reconstruction and the weight of divine judgment, they began to leave. Their departure left a power vacuum that was quickly filled by the city's commercial class. The wealthy freedmen, whose fortunes were built in the relentless energy of the marketplace, enjoyed luxury but never the highest levels of respect. Yet now, with their entire world tied to this one city, they were the only ones with the resources and the will to rebuild it. Where the old aristocracy saw only a ruin to be abandoned, the freedmen saw an unprecedented opportunity. They began buying up the shattered villas for a fraction of their former worth, realizing that prestige, which had always been inherited, could now be bought from the rubble. The city that would emerge would be transformed in ways no one could have predicted. 17 years after the Great Quake, Pompeii was a city shaped by three distinct recoveries. The most visible recovery was that of the new elite. Along the main streets, their wealth was unmistakable. Workshops and taverns thrived with renewed energy, their facades gleaming with fresh plaster and vivid paint. The grand homes they had acquired were reborn, adorned with frescoes in the latest, most fashionable style. Deeper within the city's residential blocks, a second, more modest recovery was underway. Ordinary families rebuilt their lives with pragmatic resolve, restoring their homes room by room with salvaged bricks and timber. But there were also places left behind. In forgotten corners of the city, abandoned homes stood as hollow shells, and older public buildings crumbled from neglect. While the physical scars of the earthquake remained visible, the social wounds left by the riot were now fully healed. The amphitheater had settled back into its natural rhythm, drawing spectators from Pompeii and beyond. This vibrant human world, so consumed with its own daily passions and politics, unfolded in the constant, quiet presence of the mountain. Across the bay from Pompeii, at the naval base of Misenum, lived a man who had dedicated his life to understanding the natural world. His name was Gaius Plinius Secundus, known to history as Pliny the Elder. As commander of the Roman fleet, his duty was to the sea, but his passion was for the earth, its creatures, and its phenomena. To Pliny and to all Romans, the great mountain that dominated the landscape was simply Vesuvius, a peaceful, vine-covered peak. It was a feature of the landscape, not a threat. It had slept for so long that the memory of its last fire had passed from the world of men into the realm of geological time. In the year 79 AD, the mountain awoke. Pliny and his nephew were observing the sky when they saw a cloud of a size and shape they had never seen before. It rose from the summit of Vesuvius on a tall, dark trunk, and then spread out into a massive canopy, a form the younger Pliny could best compare to a great Mediterranean umbrella pine. For Pliny the Elder, this was a natural phenomenon that demanded investigation. His scientific curiosity was sparked, and he ordered a fast boat to be prepared for a closer look. But just as he was about to depart, a frantic message arrived from a friend, a woman trapped in her seaside villa on the coast directly below the mountain. In that instant, a scientific inquiry became a naval rescue mission. Pliny ordered his fleet to be launched, not to fight an enemy but to evacuate the densely populated coastline that lay directly in the path of the danger. The great warships pushed out from the harbor at Misenum. As they drew toward the coast, the mission became an ordeal. A fine gray ash began to cover the decks, soon joined by a hail of lightweight pumice. Meanwhile, the prevailing wind carried the vast cloud directly over Pompeii, unleashing a downpour of pumice and ash that plunged the city into a suffocating darkness. The debris fell with such density that it began to accumulate everywhere, filling streets and courtyards and piling up on rooftops. People were forced to choose between sheltering in their homes or fleeing through a storm of hot, coarse gravel raining from the sky. The volcanic rock was light, but the sheer amount of it became a deadly threat. As the layers deepened, the debris rose against the doors, sealing the exits. Those who chose to stay inside now found themselves trapped and could only listen as the timbers overhead groaned under the immense strain. The structures eventually gave way, and heavy roofs came crashing down on the families who had trusted their homes to protect them. Late in the night, the great eruption column collapsed, sending an avalanche of superheated gas and ash roaring down the western slope. This first pyroclastic surge annihilated the town of Herculaneum. The morning of the second day brought no dawn, only a heavy gloom. Around this time, the third surge broke from the eruption column. This one raced toward Pompeii and crashed against the city's northern walls. The fourth followed soon after, powerful enough to sweep over the city in a deep, scorching wave. All who were still trapped inside, huddled in their homes or fighting their way through the darkness, died within seconds. In just a single day, Pompeii passed from a bustling city to a tomb. Its houses and temples, its streets and gardens, its centuries of vibrant history now lay buried beneath a barren wasteland of rock and ash. While the city of Pompeii vanished from the face of the earth, most of its people did not. The eruption gave many precious hours to escape, creating a great wave of refugees. But what would happen to the buried city? Would it be forgotten forever, or would it one day speak again? The majority of Pompeii's inhabitants successfully fled in the early hours of the catastrophe, becoming a great wave of refugees spreading out into the surrounding countryside. Emperor Titus traveled to Campania to witness the devastation and organize a relief effort. His officials surveyed the site and quickly concluded that the city lay buried too deeply. The task of excavation and rebuilding was beyond their means. A decision was made to reclaim the city's buried wealth to fund the resettlement of the survivors. Over the following months, salvage teams, guided by visible walls and columns, tunneled into the ruins, stripping them of marble facings, bronze statues, and lead piping. As the years passed, the eruption began to fade from living memory. In the centuries that followed, Pompeii underwent its strangest transformation. It became a story without a place. The Western Roman Empire collapsed, and with it the great administrative networks that had once preserved its memory. Nature reclaimed the landscape. Eventually, farmers returned, planting new vineyards and olive groves on the fertile slopes. Pompeii quietly rejoined the productive Campanian countryside. The world's first brush with the forgotten city came blindly. In the late 16th century, architect Domenico Fontana was redirecting the Sarno River, cutting a new channel directly through the buried ruins. During the project, workers stumbled upon ancient walls still adorned with painted frescoes. The city had revealed a clue to its identity, yet the world failed to recognize it. Fontana completed the project and reburied the ruins, leaving the city to its slumber for another 150 years. Pompeii's rediscovery began with events at Herculaneum. In 1709, a local farmer digging a well came upon fragments of ancient stone and marble. A generation later, Charles of Bourbon became King of Naples, and reports of earlier finds stirred his royal curiosity. He launched official excavations at Herculaneum in 1738, approaching the site as a mining operation to recover valuable antiquities for the king. Around the same time, attention turned to La Civita, believed to be the site of ancient Stabiae. A Swiss engineer named Carl Jakob Weber arrived in 1750 and took charge of the day-to-day work. Here, away from the deep tunnels of Herculaneum, Weber found a site that offered a different kind of possibility. It was a city that did not need to be broken into but could be slowly and carefully uncovered. The definitive discovery came in 1763. While clearing the area around a city gate, workers uncovered a formal public inscription with clear and unambiguous words, Res Publica Pompeianorum, the state of the Pompeians. After 15 years of excavation, Weber's method had not only revealed the shape of the city, but had restored its name. As its true identity came to light, Pompeii became a sensation across Europe. For more than a century, it remained the private possession of foreign kings, its treasures stripped to fill royal palaces. Yet this era of exploitation was nearing its end. By the mid-19th century, the Italian peninsula was being unified into a single nation. Pompeii was no longer viewed as a royal prize, it had become a national symbol. Giuseppe Fiorelli was appointed as director of the excavations at Pompeii. He immediately transformed the site from a royal quarry into a historical archive, mandating that excavations proceed layer by layer from the top down. He divided the city into a grid, ensuring that every artifact received its own precise address. During this careful work, Fiorelli's team began to notice hollow cavities in the hardened ash. When victims were engulfed by surges of fine, hot ash, their bodies eventually decomposed, but the hardened ash around them retained their forms. Fiorelli devised a method to pour liquid plaster into these voids. What emerged was extraordinary: the cast of a human being, captured with haunting clarity. The plaster casts transformed Pompeii's image, presenting it not merely as a source of classical beauty, but as a site of profound and relatable human tragedy. Yet the very act of excavation that brought the city back into the light created a tragic paradox. For nearly 2,000 years, Pompeii had been preserved precisely because it was buried. Once exposed to the elements, a second, slower destruction began. In 1997, Pompeii was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it was a shocking event in 2010 that served as the final desperate wake-up call. After days of heavy rain, an entire building known as the House of the Gladiators simply collapsed into a pile of rubble. The Italian state, with support from the European Union, launched the Great Pompeii Project, a massive initiative dedicated to saving the ancient city. Today, Pompeii exists in a state of profound contrast. It is a dead city, its life extinguished in a single catastrophic moment. And yet, it is intensely alive, drawing millions of visitors into its silent streets, making it one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world. It offers an experience no other place can. Not just a glimpse of scattered monuments, but the chance to explore the complete fabric of an ancient city, to feel the rhythms of its daily life still etched in stone. The city's ancient heart, the Forum, still opens as a grand public stage. The streets themselves pull you deeper into the city, their paving stones worn smooth by ancient feet, deep ruts carved by the wheels of countless carts. These streets lead through entire neighborhoods, revealing the city's social spectrum. The plaster casts of the victims make the past feel inescapably real, collapsing 2,000 years in an instant. Yet the main artifact of this entire story, the mountain itself, still looms above everything, an active giant in a state of temporary repose. More than 3 million people live in the vicinity of the volcano, with over 700,000 in the immediate danger zone, making it one of the most densely populated and dangerous volcanic areas on the planet. Scientists monitor the mountain constantly, and they believe that Vesuvius is overdue for another major eruption. But life here continues, just as vibrant and chaotic as it was 2,000 years ago. The millions who live around the modern bay do so not because they've forgotten the past, but because this is their home, and roots often run deeper than fear. In the end, Pompeii is more than just a tragedy preserved in ash. It is a lasting testament to the stubborn human impulse to build, to thrive, and to live fully, even on ground that they know can betray them.